I still didn't start it, and now I am. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go ahead. I'll sort of continue our introduction. So those were some of the housekeeping notes. I do want to take a moment to thank all of our chambers of commerce. So in no particular order, in Buffalo, we have Tanya, who's our chamber leader there. Thank you, Tanya, for all the great work you're doing in Buffalo. In Marshfield, we have Casey. Casey's probably sitting on the edge of the computer. So thank you for your support in Marshfield. In Aurora, we have Shannon. Shannon, thank you for everything you're doing. And then finally in Salem, we have Tabitha. So we really appreciate all of our chambers of commerce sort of collectively helping us get the information out. I do want to share with you one more quick, it's hopefully an interesting piece of work that's going on that would be helpful to some of you, and then we'll get into our speaker conversation. For those of you who may not be aware, there's a platform called Business 911 that is now up and running. It was launched summer of last year. And it's a great resource for business owners, community members, just trying to figure out what stuff is there in our backyard. So you can come to this site, you can click on growmissouri.com, and you can sort of see you can find resources that are in your community. You can look for jobs that may be in the community. If you're looking to build or expand a business, you can see what properties are there, events going on locally. If you don't know where to turn to, just click on 911 support, and you can ping us with your questions. So there's a whole series of things, and this was built really in a way to help our local businesses and entrepreneurs looking to start businesses in our community find some of the basic information as easily as possible. And in there's two areas that I just want to highlight. One is jobs. There's a really nice catalog in here that outlines all the jobs that are available in our community. You can sort of see how many jobs are listed by community. This is a great resource, free resource for local business owners. If you want to come in and create an account and post your jobs, really encourage this for some of the community leaders who may not be aware that this exists. For those of you who are here, please do continue to inform. For the bankers, accountants, lawyers, other services, do let your community members know that this exists. Educators, hopefully our principals, high school principals and superintendents know about this. So any of our graduating students that are looking for local jobs, we can help keep some of our talent local. So this exists, and it's free and accessible to you. And after today's conversations, what you will also see is there's this tab called Educational Series. And here we sort of identify our next speaker. All of our conversations are recorded. So if you ever want to look and see what some of the previous conversations were, you can look at those online as well. So with that in place, then our next speaker series is going to be folks from the Missouri S&T Small Business Development Center. That will be taking place. Typically, this is on third Thursday of every month. Next month will be on the fourth Thursday, so April 25th from 12 to 1. This team has some really great assets. Again, if you're a small business owner, and we use the term business sort of loosely. If you're a nonprofit leader, if you're a volunteer person, if you're part of a church and you're just sort of looking to figure out how to improve the way your organization runs and operates, this series hopefully is a great way for all of you to learn a bit more. Okay, so with that, let me pause so without further ado, I want to talk briefly about Luke Holtschneider. Luke is, we're incredibly fortunate to have Luke join us today. Luke is with Department of Economic Development, Missouri Department of Economic Development. He's the deputy director there. Luke is a brilliant economic developer. We've now had a chance to work with Luke for over 3 years. Really passionate individual, passionate about Missouri, Prior to this role, he served in the rural development role. So rural development, rural communities are very near and dear to Luke's heart. And we're fortunate that Luke's been as engaged with the GROW program. He knows what we're trying to do. He's seen what we've done well. He's seen what hasn't worked. So I think we're quite fortunate to have basically a friend and an ally in the State Department who can really sort of help guide us and take some of our messaging back. So we were excited to have Luke present. Luke's boss, Rob Dixon, had initially committed to speak, but when you're running the state, things happen, and we appreciate the fact that Luke could quickly fill in for Rob. So we're very excited. Luke, thank you so much for joining us. So with that, let me sort of turn it over to you, Luke. I will manage your PowerPoint slide. You just guide me on when you want me to flip the slides, and I will do that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. As Rashu mentioned, Luke Holtschneider, extremely excited to get the opportunity to visit with you guys today, especially the communities involved. I've been with the agency about 10 years now, and kind of my initial rollout into economic development was managing projects for Southern Missouri, primarily Southwest, South Central, and Central Missouri. So each of these communities that are present today have been, a part of those communities over the years and the opportunities that have been presented to you. So, appreciate this chance. I must say, Rob Dixon was planning to attend, and I guess fortunately / unfortunately, he was asked to travel along with the governor today, as well as yesterday and Tuesday to promote the state reorganization that is underway at this time, which I'm going to highlight through this presentation today. But so he's off with the big boss today. Otherwise, he would have loved to have been here visiting with you guys. So we want to go ahead and kind of jump into the presentation. Okay, as mentioned with the Department of Economic Development, and I want to frame up. There's, I think many of you on the call, and from your various functions and roles within your communities, are familiar with the agency. But stepping back about a year ago, our department felt the need to identify and better strategize on a economic strategy for the state of Missouri, because ultimately, why we're here is really to create greater opportunities for Missourians, and for that opportunity to translate into prosperous individuals and communities. And so being entrusted with a series of resources and personnel, we really had to focus on really our sole being for why we are here, and really identifying the best ways that we can impact the state of Missouri through both business development, community development, workforce development, and tourism. So again, stepping back, it's literally right at a year ago, March 21, we started this effort, and we coined the phrase to become the best in the Midwest. We set our sights on becoming the best state economy as well as the best state economic development agency in the Midwest, with the premise that Missourians deserve to have the best. We traveled last summer, nearly about as many people reached as we did miles traveled. But we traveled and wanted to hear from the community leaders, the business leaders, the nonprofits, to understand, what are the issues that they're facing, what are the needs in which the state could better assist them. And, it really revolved around workforce. And so as you can see in the top right picture, the Best Midwest Initiative really had a cornerstone on, to be the best, we have to have the talent for tomorrow in place. So we undertook, along with both community and business engagement efforts, a really thorough look at how our economy is, as well as how it compares to really some Midwestern peer states. So looking at 14 Midwestern economies, and the information was not good. And so we'll roll through these really quick, but we needed to level set in order to identify a path to get to where we wanted to go. We ultimately had to establish a baseline of where we're at. And so, what we saw is while our economy was growing, we weren't growing at the pace of our neighbors. And so we were 14 out of 14 for GDP growth, 8 out of 14 for wage growth, 9 out of 14 for job growth. Again, these aren't pretty. 11 out of 14 for per capita income, 12 out of 14 for labor productivity. And what we saw was there were mega trends, so things, large global factors that influence our state economy, as well there are practices within our state and our strategy that were not leading to the most impactful and successful strategic areas of focus. And one of those, ultimately, we've had seven different leaders in the Department of Economic Development in less than 10 years. And so the stability and the consistent drive and focus has been lacking. We are still, I shouldn't say at this point still, but as going through this process, we were operating under a strategy that was developed over 10 years ago. It was, if you look back 10 years ago, just think of the change in the economy and what technology has done to really disrupt our economy. Yet we were still operating under an economic strategy that dated over a decade ago. Some of the things that we found that were just kind of key insights as we did these state-to-state comparisons. We saw on the macro level, influences and trends across the global economy. We saw on the state level how our macro state level economic indicators were showing, and then we dove into how is our state economic development agency comparing to our Midwestern peers. And what we saw were the largest with ultimately some of the lowest results. This is one of those just kind of moments where, as an economic development agency, we're about 865. The average of the Midwestern peer states, and if you take Missouri out of that average, was 154. So the second largest economic development agency was more than 500 FTEs less than our department. And I'll kind of get to what that means here in a minute. And this slide really highlights that we do more things than almost all of those states. None of those states had a toolbox that was as large as ours, and ultimately they were having better impacts and success towards core business, community, and workforce development. So this was really some of that leading information to how do we better structure and strategize our agency so that we can get those results that most impact the communities across the state of Missouri. We weren't focusing near the level of attention as our other states on growing businesses, developing businesses. Yes, you could look at just based on the size of the organization, we were going to be, as far as a percentage, less. But when you look at how to strategize and manage a large agency, if you are focusing on everything, ultimately you're focusing on nothing. That correlated to our budget as well. Very little was really corely devoted to business development. These are just some numbers you can see. We really had to, and it's something that I think is across the economy that we have to do, is we really have to use data to our advantage to understand, the creation of our agency to assist businesses and over 10,500 jobs. That's a good number. But when you look at it in a comparison against other states, they're growing and assisting more businesses on more jobs based on their size of their state workforce than what we are. So we can't sweep these things under the rug anymore. We have to confront them so that we can have a clear understanding of exactly where we're at if we ever want to move the needle forward. And so I wanted to run through that information because I think that needed to highlight that, change is difficult, change is necessary, and we really have to level set on why change. Change for the sake of change is not beneficial, but using information and data to guide us and make strategic change based on a core mission and aspiration is really what we're striving for. We as a state agency do not create the jobs. We assist the communities, the employers, and the citizens on creating an environment that economic growth can occur. And so we wanted to level set on, how can we best do that using strategies and practices that we identified from those peer states. So, if as any business owner or community partner, I think would relate to, if it's done really well somewhere else, figure out why it's doing so well somewhere else. Maybe you can just blanket, bring that approach in, or you can learn from it. And so what we did was, we've spent an entire year on this, is learning what it's going to take to best deliver results and what's needed from communities just like yours. So we've, as I mentioned, those 4,000 miles nearly that we traveled on the Best of Midwest kind of tour and roadshow, we took into account, it wasn't a checkbox to just say we did it. Everything was documented, everything was utilized and analyzed in the really the workshops on how we can utilize that input and feedback to best meet the needs of the businesses and communities around the state. I want to jump to, because I think the change is where it gets really exciting. I don't need to go through each of these individually, but we knew structurally, we couldn't focus because we were focused on everything. So the governor issued 3 executive orders 3 months ago. So the day after the State of the State, the first 3 executive orders were the reorganization of state government, and that is primarily driven through the restructuring and realignment of the Department of Economic Development. So you can see these transitions were not ultimately just to cut the size of the department down, but it was to better align these services within the entire state administration and the full resources of state government, so that it doesn't become your Department of Economic Development being a holding company for a lot of divisions that may be more useful and beneficial when aligned with another agency. So I want to introduce you first to the new DED. It's been extremely exciting and a lot of build up to this, and obviously there's going to be change in number of FTEs. But what it is really guiding principles that were the themes that we saw in these state comparisons. So what the other states were doing, if you could step back one slide, I do want to make sure that this is conveyed and understood by everybody. But those states that were leading, and it wasn't just the agency was showing success. That success is seen on the state level and through the business communities and the community customers. Is these agencies were laser focused on business development, community development, and ultimately connecting business and workforce. They were a organization that didn't focus necessarily their attention on just the administration of a program, but how to utilize resources to meet customer needs. So they were very focused and very business-like on being customer-centric. We understand, and I think you guys would appreciate as well, is that we can't have a one-size-fits-all. Southwest Missouri is very different than Southeast, as well Northeast, Northwest. while they may carry a title rule even at times, the strategies are going to be different, and the areas of need may be different that can best enable economic growth. So we have to look both at how we best assist and how we utilize resources based on regional impact. We have to be data driven. It's a day of data. You know, who would have thought 15 years ago that we would have 5 communities and actually 6 if you count. I'm in Jefferson City right now, all connected, all engaging through the use of technology. We have to use this information that's at our fingertips to better drive and influence our decisions. And then we as an agency, we need to be a more professionally driven, more developed and focused agency. So it's really focusing on building a stronger team here at the department. And so what we've looked at with becoming regionally, and I'll get into this a little bit more moving forward, but we need to focus on, you know, established regions. And so these regions that you see on the screen right now, while you're seeing 6 regions, what we utilized to create these were the labor market information through the Department of Labor and LMI to better identify how we can use regional geographic areas in the data sets so that we, as we become a regional organization, can better utilize data and information to assist the communities within those regions on plans. So this is the unveiling of the new Department of Economic Development. We are focusing on creating a new structure. A structure does not solve the problem. A structure allows us to focus and align ourselves based on our core areas of need and impact and really resource delivery. So regional engagement, Missouri One Start, a solutions division, tourism, the Missouri Housing Development Corporation, strategy and performance, and administration. I'll touch on these briefly moving forward. So regional engagement, I think this is the one where I hope and I know that this is one where we're focusing, you know, a large amount of our effort, and right now at this point in time, we feel is really one of the most impactful ways that we can become a better resource and partner with the communities around the state. Can't see in the screens, but hopefully in Marshfield, I believe we have 2 of the DED regional project managers joining the Marshfield team today in this dialogue. But, you know, really that focus is going to be on how do we become more engaged, more available and relatable, and be not there just when you call us and need us on something that you've already identified the need or issue, but how can we be a part of these conversations on a daily basis to help build strategic direction across the regions and better inform our resource teams within the agency on those needs and how we can best utilize the resources we have. Business and Community Solutions, which is really a conglomerate of the different resource programs within the agency. The next slide will show you some of those areas of focus within that division. So there's a business and community finance, development/redevelopment finance for your historic and brownfield type programs. We do have the international office, Missouri Technology Corporation, I'll mention here in a little bit. Our community development block grant, which I believe, and I know each of these communities would be eligible for. The Missouri Community Service Commission, really, if you're familiar and aware of AmeriCorps, that is the state's, they operate the state's AmeriCorps program. So coming in and assisting communities with really needed workforce and volunteer efforts after disasters, and you know, the plethora of programs within all of those teams, such as Main Street, TIF, tax increment finance, downtown revitalization programs. So there's really a slew. a couple $100 million annually worth of resources here. The disconnect has been previously that we were just a function of administering those programs. What we need to do is target and utilize those to meet the needs and opportunities that are identified within the regions. Not establish a one size has to fit all, because I think it was mentioned earlier, shown earlier, typically one size fits none. So we need to look at how we can better utilize to meet the community and business needs. One Star Division is, so if you're familiar and if you saw earlier, the Division of Workforce Development is a big entity within our department. Part of the reorganization is they will move to the Department of Higher Education, and it's a true alignment on focusing on individuals post high school. So if you look at where our Division of Workforce Development focused, it was really on adults at all ages that were currently experiencing a layoff, dislocated, unemployed, and higher ed is looking at different areas in which they can better assist on the educational side post high school. So the connection there needed to be a lot more integrated, and so that division, while moving to the Department of Higher Education, what stayed is this Missouri One Start Division, which is focused on delivering tailored and custom financial solutions to the businesses for their training needs. It's really a ideal and a extremely successful model that's been proven. You read and you see, and we've visited with many. A lot of the southeastern states really have this locked in on how they're doing it. But as a global economy, the need for a more experienced and higher number of professionals in the field and workforce is really our biggest issue and factor that we're facing right now. And so what Missouri One Start would do and will do, and is really in the development stage of doing, is providing those custom solutions to meet your business's needs. And really that's through helping recruit, hire, and train through financial resources workforce to meet the growing business needs. To me, it's extremely unique because you look back 10 years ago, it was, so many people looking for jobs. There was an abundance of workforce and not enough job opportunities. We've flipped that equation. We as a department really need to not wait 10 years to do another strategy and plan on this. We need to constantly be strategizing and utilizing information so that, try new things, become innovative, at times become risk takers, but understand what you're trying to do and the measured impact you're trying to achieve. And if we're unsuccessful, we need to recognize it and identify what went wrong and change. We shouldn't just wait and then assume, especially in this type of economy where, there's changes and disruptions, almost on a daily kind of cadence here, that we need to consistently and constantly be driving strategic decisions on an ongoing basis. We'll move past that slide. Tourism will stay as it is. We'll continue on past that. And so kind of getting into the program. So, as we talked about, we needed a structure that could best facilitate and allow the department to operate in a fashion that's going to better assist and achieve results for the communities and the businesses around the state. The structure doesn't holistically do that. So we have to also look at our programming on, what have we heard? What have we seen? What is the flexibility within the programs we have? But also what programs are needed to drive growth and impact. And so we will be, and we are currently looking through our both business development tools, community workforce, and others on ways that we can make them more impactful and successful and not confine them to a really one size fits all. I mentioned earlier our community development block grants. That tends to be a very focused on public infrastructure, infrastructure repair and replacement. But we're also looking at what are ways we can utilize our community development as well our business development resources to drive growth and really approach some of those target issues we're facing on infrastructure and workforce development. So looking at ways to better utilize or to open up use of these programs to meet your specific community needs and your regional needs that may be different across the state. The Youth Opportunity Tax Credit Program and Neighborhood Assistance Program really are kind of our lead programs for driving nonprofit capabilities in the community. As you can see on the slides, there's really a focus on youth, workforce, and just community sustainability, and that comes in many different ways. There is flexibility to prioritize the use of funding year to year, and it helps a nonprofit that many times is looking at how do we entice and draw in a corporate sponsor to get engaged into what we're doing. And this becomes, I don't want to say the carrot to entice them, but it is a contribution tax credit program. So this program is approved to nonprofit 501c3 organizations that really meet some of these purpose and priority statements. But the nonprofit is then able to utilize tax credits to then entice a corporate organization or there's different criteria on it that we can show on the website, but for their donation, it would be offset either at a 50% or a 70% tax credit from their contribution. So, easy numbers. If somebody gave the nonprofit $100, they would either get either 50 cents or 70 cents back on that dollar of contribution. So it's a very good way to gain buy-in and support from those local and regional partners. Missouri Technology Corporation houses many different startup and early growth stage company programs. I will say, and something we're trying to figure out and identify are ways to spread this program's impact into more areas than your typical innovative, St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield. There's very little even in Columbia, because there's a ton of great ideas and innovation that comes out of the rural communities, and we shouldn't force it to and only assist in those areas. How can we better assist, I think, is where we're going to want to go with that part of the organization to be a better support entity for those innovative companies in rural Missouri. Okay. If Marshfield, is there a way to turn the camera to Marshfield? I'd like to.
Casey, can you unmute your phone? Or your line?
Hello?
Yep, we hear you.
Okay.
Okay, do we have Krista and Teresa in the room?
Yeah.
Sorry guys, put you on the spot like that, but we do. So I do want to introduce everybody to Teresa, who you're seeing on your left, and Krista on your right here. Teresa has been with the Department of Economic Development for how many years now?
16.
16, and has worked with our Division of Workforce Development, but most recently she has come on board to become a regional project manager for the department. She bases out of Marshfield. Bases out of Marshfield, and will cover. If you remember the map I had shown earlier of the regional communities, she'll be a regional point of contact for Southwest Missouri to help and engage on business development, community development, those type of conversations. And so great asset. extremely appreciative to have Teresa continue to stay with the agency and kind of take on that new role for the department. And sitting next to her, we have Krista Atchison. Krista is just a couple weeks in with the Department of Economic Development, but I think to many of you guys, maybe a familiar face and name. Krista comes to us from Clinton, Missouri. She has had roles with the Clinton Chamber of Commerce as well, the executive director for Missouri Community Betterment previously as well. So a very good understanding and background in both community development and industrial and commercial business development. So great asset on board. And as I mentioned, regional engagement, these are going to be two of your direct points of contact at the community level on bringing them into the community conversations on how do you as a community strategize to realize economic impact. They both represent our agency and the resources we have, but also in many ways a front door, an open door to other state agencies and some of the federal partners that we can help bring in based on the relationships and contacts. So extremely excited to have these two on board. And where we're going really long term with this is building teams 4, 5, 7 individuals that will be regionally located in those 6 geographic regions around the state that will be your DED front door and really your community and regional partners for the business and community development. So we're extremely excited to have these two on board. And I had to, since I knew that they were going to be in Marshfield, I had to make sure everybody got a chance to, visually meet them, and, their information will be shared, and it was on that slide. So you'll be able to reach out to them and engage with them moving forward. So if there's something you two want to add, I'd love to pick that up too.
Appreciate the nice introduction, Luke. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words.
No, these two are they're strong background in economic and community development, workforce development is really where we've seen ability to better assist communities is being there and being part of these communities and helping identify practical and innovative ways to move the local and regional economies forward. So focusing on building large DED presence in the regions. We've tried that before for certain reasons. It, halted 15, 20 years ago. Prior to this effort, we had 6 people that were covering the entire state. So it was very difficult for DED to be a value add. We had value, we had programs, we had resources. The value add is being a part of these conversations and really trying to become an asset in helping through our understanding and experience across the state and applying that into the communities within the regions. So I'm right at 12:45. So I wanted to save the last 15 for some Q&A. And if there's anything that you have questions on, a little more clarity, I will say we offer a lot of programs. There's a lot of resources. Sometimes expecting businesses and communities to feel like they should be able to navigate those on their own is where we've fallen short. And so what this does is puts those resources and that technical knowledge in your communities. So I know I kind of breezed through some of the programs, and that's because I think these relationships allow greater opportunity for you to not only convey the need and opportunities, but also they being a front door into our solutions on how we best utilize our resources.
Great. Luke, thank you so much for your feedback. That was tremendous. Quick reminder for all the attendees. Please do think about any questions that you have, and just to get the conversation started, maybe I'll throw 1 or 2 questions out there. But please do think about your questions. Also, hopefully all of you have those survey forms in front of you. Please do fill that out. If you're, Luke, would it be okay if we shared this presentation with the attendees for those who want to see it in more detail? Is that okay?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yep.
So if for any of these attendees who want to give us your email address, if you just provide us that information, we'll certainly give the presentation to all the chamber leaders to share it with their members. But if any of you want this, we can certainly send that as well. So I guess let me sort of throw out a question, and this may be a big question. You can feel free to break it down into one or two areas. First of all, Luke, didn't know what to expect in the presentation. It was incredibly refreshing to see the openness and forthcoming nature of the presentation. And so really calling out the history of DED and identifying what the issues and challenges are, and to see what a massive shift of the Titanic you have made. It's not easy, and so obviously applaud your organization, the governor, for the big bold thinking. So thank you for sharing that. You shared a lot of information, but there's some really powerful dimensions to the conversation. So thank you for that. Here's my first question. In our audience, I think we have broad sort of demographics and groups of people. We have business owners, nonprofit leaders, community leaders, educators. You've talked about a lot of different programs. Maybe let's pick business owners, nonprofit leaders. As soon as we leave today, what's one or two things that you think the team should be thinking about as a next step that they can immediately take to plug into the conversations, the resources? What would you suggest? Some very practical things for some of these leaders to be thinking about.
I think, and I applaud the effort of what the GROW Initiative is doing and enabling, because what we're doing, I think, is very very consistent with some best practice strategies at a community level as well. The very shoot from the hip on not identifying a long-term and short-term strategic direction for a community, and bringing together the business, the civic, the municipal, the nonprofit leaders to really identify what is the vision for the community, what are the needs or the barriers that may be interfering with that growth, and what are the opportunities for success. So for us to best assist and best utilize the resources trusted with our agency is to make sure that we're aligning the use of those programs and dollars for those needs and opportunities that are really planned and strategic, that grow both that local, regional, and state economy. So I think the key takeaway is never underestimating the need for a strong strategy and plan. And if there are needs that would drive those efforts forward and can be really tied to that strategic need and outcome, we will do everything we can to figure out, both internally as well as with our partners, how to assist that need. But it's very difficult when it becomes a very unconnected need that doesn't seem to have fully been planned among some of the leaders. So that assurance of success and impact is very limited. And so I would say that would be a key takeaway.
Great. But the thing, again, just to reiterate the words you used, I think the promising element of all of our 5 GROW communities is that they do have a very legitimate and strong local plan. There's local leadership, there's local priorities. And just to sort of highlight one or two elements that you identified, if you're a nonprofit leader, given this tax incentive structure to take in funding, every local foundations, local nonprofits, that's something we really need to make sure our local nonprofits understand. how they're communicating that to their funders and donors, because that's immediate benefit. This is a program that's available now, or is this being
Yes.
conceived?
Yes, it is current.
Okay, great. So that's to me, it's a real quick win. The other area is some of our communities right now are developing very, very precise strategies for facilities and sites that have been sort of sitting vacant for decade, and in some case decades.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously having your local representatives being part of those conversations. Buffalo, for example, is about to launch a strategy on 4 specific sites. So making sure that they're part of that conversation so we can more easily connect the dots between local, regional, and state discussions would be tremendously powerful. Sounds like those would be potentially
correct. And just on that scenario alone, so we've, with our community development block grant dollars, which are federal dollars that the state administers on behalf of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, a federal agency. We've attended and have another follow-up with them on how can we broaden the usage of those funds to assist with maybe site development as opposed to the traditional uses. So we're looking at ways to offer some more focused use of those dollars based on really it tying to a regional plan and an impact. So I think the awareness of those outcomes will be communicated through our regional teams, and as well the intake of what the communities are trying to do. The more we know at the beginning and are able to engage in that conversation, we can also convey state strategies that are underway, as well as existing resources that may be able to, like right now, be able to assist, such as the nonprofit NAP/YOP programs.
Great. Okay, let's go out to our communities. Tanya, Buffalo, let me go to you first and see if we have any questions there.
All right, I do have a question. In our area, our school district is working really hard to stay with the times and technology, but one of the issues that we have as a rural community is broadband access for people that live in the country to be able to have reliable internet service. Do you guys have a plan to help with that so that these communities can start having that access so that their children can have it at home?
Definitely, and great question. I think, broadband, nobody could say that it's not important. It is extremely important, everything we do. My experience in working, focusing on rural development statewide, that was the, kind of overarching issue that you would see community to community, every sector within a community ultimately was struggling with at times as well. That the department has created a Office of Broadband Development. We've hired a state broadband director, and there is a state broadband plan that it's drafted and kind of going through final revision process right now. But I will say that the state broadband director, Tim Arbeiter, is a former chamber executive from Cape Girardeau, and then from Blue Springs, Missouri, or Lee Summit, Missouri. But it's working in partnership with both federal, other states, and then some of the regional entities, as well the provider community, on how do we approach this not in a very isolated and siloed fashion, but with all those organizations and entities that both need and have opportunity to assist. How do we move that forward? And so the state's receiving not the state organization as an organization, but providers in the state of Missouri are awarded about $250 some odd million to expand high-speed internet, primarily a lot of it in southern Missouri. As well, USDA Rural Development has some funding that's becoming available. And the state of Missouri, we've also approached the legislature this year for an appropriation for a broadband grant program to assist local communities and provider organizations to expand high-speed internet into the unserved and underserved parts of the state. So it's both looking at it from an immediate, how do we begin to address, as well, how do we build a infrastructure that's going to support economic growth long term.
Very cool. Thanks, Tanya. Aurora, Shannon, do we have any questions in Aurora?
Yes, we do. Hi, guys. How are you? Do you have a specific example of a project from 2018 that was very successful in the past year in a rural community, or something that's been started that you see is going to be successful, but it's maybe going to take a little bit of time?
As far as
just a specific project, something.
Just an example that, you know, to create a visual of ideas that we could strive for. Something you've seen that's successful.
For specifically a rural community. And I know you guys have gone through the restructuring, so that's kind of probably maybe not quite in place yet for the specific rural community.
Well, I think there's success, you know, in a large swath of communities, some both on the business development side, where you have a local industry that, I don't know if I'm causing the feedback.
Go ahead. We should be good.
Where you have, you know, local industry that may be growing and expanding. There's some with very strong community development efforts where you've seen things. Level of success is based on the community. So, you know, it's trying in my mind pull one out. I'm not necessarily on the project management side anymore on those day to day, but you know, and I don't want to overutilize the Sedalia growth that's happened there, but you know, ultimately, even in Southeast Missouri, very familiar with and have worked on a couple projects on industry growth that, you know, if you look at it in comparison to a St. Louis or Kansas City, it's not gonna compare up as far as number of jobs or capital investment. But what it meant to these communities was extremely impactful in the fact of it both solidified the long-term growth opportunities of that industry and that community, and gave you know, new job opportunities for the existing citizens. The one I'm, you know, New Madrid is the community I'm kind of discussing at this point in time, where and how it became to be was not a one entity met the needs or addressed the problem. You know, these types of efforts take the utility, it takes the municipality, it takes the school system, the workforce system, you know, chamber, IDA, whatever the case may be, to look at, you know, from an overarching viewpoint, what are we positioned well to best, that could be most successful in our community? How do we highlight that, and how do we make it as easy as possible for them to operate here? And so it's not comparing every community to each other, because those opportunities are different wherever you look. I know that didn't get into a very specific business development project, but I think we, you know, on 100+ you know, business expansions last year, a good chunk of them are going to be in the metropolitan areas. I will say that, but the other opportunities for growth are seen, and they are taking place. And common theme of what you see, why those are happening, is really a strong community that has identified what types of business or industry can best sustain and grow in their community and build off of the base that they have.
Great.
Very good. Thank you. We do have one more question. As far as us, Aurora, or just one of our rural communities, would Teresa or Krista be our first point of contact if we have questions, and then kind of go from there?
Yes. Yes. And the one difference in all the grow communities, so Salem actually falls within a different region within our kind of structure. And so they would be part of the central with, we've got Michelle Hadaway and Jonathan Mack that are currently on that team. So that slide has their contact information. I did place the communities that, kind of fell within the bounds of those teams.
Very cool. Okay, so let's go to Salem. Salem team, any thoughts, questions?
Hello, thank you for being with us today, Luke. I'm Sally. I'm the economic. Can you hear us?
We can hear you. Yes, Sally. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. My name's Sally Burbridge. I'm the Economic Development Director for the City of Salem and Dade County. I have spoken with both Michelle and Jonathan on the phone. I'm just curious, you had mentioned, Luke, and I'm not asking to be critical, I'm just curious. You'd mentioned that there were going to be multiple folks covering each of those regions. Do you have any idea time frame when we might be fully staffed and hired up? Just asking because sometimes just getting information back and forth is a little more timely than what is ideal. So just asking.
Yeah, so it's going to be a process that both from the budgetary side and then the recruitment and hiring in of folks. We started with 6. We're roughly around 14, I believe, right now. Our projection is in the upper 30s number of boots on the ground project managers across the state, and so we're by the end of calendar year. I mix up calendar and fiscal years all the time, so I got to get my mindset on where we're at. But in about a year and a half from now, we're looking to be in the 30-ish range, and 4, 5, 6 folks representing each of those regions.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sally. And Marshfield, and any questions?
I had my questions answered in-house, so we are good.
Okay, perfect.
Utilizing those regional resources. There you go.
Perfect.
Yes, exactly.
Very cool. Well, Luke, thank you so much for your time. And our hope is in the next 8 months, we will have some very specific case studies that the Grow communities will be able to generate to say, here's an example of a project that was locally identified. We partnered with DED and brought to fruition. So looking forward to the new structure, looking forward to the partnerships with DED. And we've got, as a matter of fact, as soon as we hang up, I will reach out to you and to set up a handful of conversations to get your teams up to speed on all the Grow activities that are going on. Some of the conversations I know will end up affecting and be impactful, not just to the Grow communities, but also the broader region. So we very much thank you for your time. All the attendees, please do fill out your surveys and give those to your chamber leaders. And just a quick housekeeping note, next, am I sharing my screen right now? I don't think I am. One sec. So, next month, again, just a reminder, thanks to our team in Salem, Tabitha, she's helped organize these 2 wonderful speakers. So if you have a small business, for-profit, nonprofit, are looking for guidance on how to improve sales, lower costs, be more profitable, acquire more customers, Karen and Travin are amazing leaders on that front and can be tremendously helpful. So with that, we will pause. Thank you so much for your time, and we will talk to you in just about a month. Take care, everyone.
I enjoyed having them together. They work very well. They do.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you going?